Escort him out. This is a wedding, not a soup kitchen. The voice cut through the grand crystal hall like the sharp edge of a broken champagne flute. Guests in tailored tuxedos and glittering gowns turned in unison toward the entrance. A frail, silver-haired man, clothes wrinkled, shoes worn thin, was being pulled back by two suited security guards. His feet dragged on the edge of the red aisle carpet inches from the archway, adorned with white roses and gold satin. 10 steps ahead stood the bride, Maggie St. James, daughter of real estate royalty, art curator, bride in a six-figure wedding. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her bouquet had already slipped from her hand, its yellow mimosa scattered like quiet explosions across the floor. "Maggie, do you know this man?" the groom asked, voice hushed but strained. She didn't respond. She just nodded slowly, deliberately, as if waking from a dream she hadn't realized she'd never left. 3 years earlier, a winter morning, bitter winds swept through downtown Chicago, carrying the sharpness of lake ice in every gust. Maggie, fresh from Paris and working her first job at an art magazine, spotted him crouched under the awning of a shuttered bookstore. He didn't beg, didn't look up. No cardboard sign, no donation cup. Just two gloved hands folded together, his eyes fixed on the sidewalk, like it might open up and swallow him whole. She walked past, then turned around. She went into a nearby corner store, bought a hot egg sandwich and a paper cup of soy milk tea. She placed it in front of him. No words, no pity, no fanfare. He looked up. Their eyes met. He gave a barely perceptible nod. She nodded back, then walked away. The next day he was there again, and the day after that, 1 week, 1 month, then a year. Every morning, same ritual, a small meal, a quiet offering. A nod exchanged like a secret handshake between two people the world had forgotten. She never asked his name, never shared his presence on social media, never told anyone, not even her fiancé. It was the only part of her life that existed without an audience. He only ever spoke once. One morning as she set the sandwich and tea down, he looked at her and said quietly, "Thank you for not seeing through me like I'm nothing." Maggie was born into elegance. Her father, Alexander St. James, owned half the skyline in commercial real estate. Her mother curated galas and donated sculptures to museums, with plaques bearing the family name. She studied fine arts in Paris, played cello, spoke fluent French, and was engaged to Matthew Callahan, a rising legal star and son of a state Supreme Court judge. Their wedding would be the event of the year, gold-foiled invitations, a private pianist flown in from Montreal. The press already whispered about it like it was royalty. 2 days before the wedding, a thin envelope was left on the marble doorstep of her penthouse suite. No sender, no postmark, clearly hand-delivered. Inside was a torn piece of notebook paper, the lines faint, the handwriting slanted and steady. "I'll come, not to ruin anything, but to keep a promise I owe." No signature, no return address. But she knew that handwriting, and she didn't tell anyone. Not Matthew, not her mother, not even her reflection. She just folded the paper, slipped it into her wallet, and waited. The room had gone cold despite the amber light from chandeliers overhead and the warmth of champagne still bubbling in untouched glasses. Some guests turned away in discomfort. Others raised their phones, poised to capture what they assumed was the start of a scandal. A homeless man interrupting a $1 million wedding? The two security guards tightened their grip, dragging him backward by the arms. His shoes scraped along the polished floor. The man's mouth remained shut. His shoulders didn't fight. He bore it the way one might bear winter, silent and inevitable. Then Maggie moved. She stepped off the aisle, her white train trailing behind her, like a wave pulled from shore. Each heel struck the floor like a quiet drumbeat. She walked past the whispering guests, past her frozen fiancé, and stopped directly in front of the guards. "Let him go." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The guards hesitated, looking to the wedding planner, who looked to her father, Alexander St. James, seated in the front row. He shook his head, livid. "Maggie," he hissed under his breath, "do you know what you're doing?" She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on the man. She took a step closer and gently reached for his hand, calloused, knotted, discolored from cold and time. "You saved me," she whispered. "Fox River. The bridge collapse. I was 9. You pulled me out of the back seat before the car went under." The man looked up, slowly, Gasps echoed across the room like falling dominoes. Someone dropped a glass. A woman clapped her hand to her mouth. From the back row, a trembling voice cut through. Wait wasn't there, an unnamed man in that story. A fire, a school bus, a few kids trapped. They never found him. The main door swung open again. 3 men in military dress blues entered, walking in formation. One carried a box wrapped in faded velvet. They stopped at the edge of the aisle. The leader, a tall man with gray at his temples and solemn eyes, stepped forward. Captain Ben Morales, U.S. Urban Rescue Unit, retired. I'm here on behalf of those who never got to thank him. He turned to the old man. This man is Captain Thomas Reed, former firefighter, decorated veteran urban disaster specialist. In 2006, during a structural collapse on Fox River Bridge, he personally rescued 5 civilians, 3 of them children. A murmur swept through the room like wind through dry leaves. Captain Morales opened the box. Inside lay a tarnished silver star, a charred helmet visor, and a photograph, a younger version of Thomas Reed, arms wrapped around a bloodied child sprinting through smoke. After losing his daughter in a gas explosion a year later, Captain Reed vanished. No press, no pension. He declined all recognition. He's been off the grid ever since, until she, Morales, gestured to Maggie, brought him back to life, one breakfast at a time. Her father stood now, anger pushing through his restraint. This is absurd. You're humiliating yourself, us. This is your wedding. Maggie didn't turn to him. No, this was a ceremony. This is what matters. She turned back to Thomas. You carried me from a sinking car. You walked into fire for strangers. And for years, no one saw you. Not really, but I did, she added. Not by name, not by title. Just by the weight you carried and never dropped. Matthew, still holding her bouquet, watched from a distance. He didn't step forward. He didn't stop her. He knew this was no longer his story to finish. Maggie looked up at Thomas. Would you walk me down the aisle? He hesitated for a breath, then nodded. Not as a hero, not as a ghost from the past, but as a man whose life had been pieced back together by something as simple as being seen. Together they turned. A hush fell over the room. No violins, no cues. Just the sound of respect, palpable and sharp, as 2 people walked side by side into the one moment neither of them ever thought would come. The wedding in its original sense never resumed. There were no vows, no slow dances, no 5-tiered cake-slicing moment under the camera's flash. The string quartet quietly packed their instruments while guests lingered, not in impatience, but in awe. What they had witnessed wasn't the union of 2 last names. It was something quieter, more sacred. A woman walking beside the man who had once pulled her from fire and now, years later, from forgetfulness. Maggie never returned to St. James Realty. She declined the honeymoon, left the penthouse, and moved into a modest brick apartment 2 blocks from where she first met Thomas. There she opened a place called the Promise Corner. No neon sign, no grand opening, just a simple wooden placard hanging above the door. No one disappears when someone remembers them in the morning. Every day from 6:30 to 9:00 a.m., the Promise Corner served hot tea, warm bread, and soft shelter to anyone who walked through the door. No questions, no explanations, no paperwork. No one had to earn their seat. They only had to show up. Thomas Reed didn't stay. 1 week after the wedding, he left quietly. No goodbye, no return address. But he did leave behind a folded note tucked under the sugar jar near the register. You gave me back something I thought I buried. Now it's time I help someone else find theirs. From then on, Maggie received a postcard every month, from cities she'd never visited: Toledo, Tulsa, Billings, El Paso. Each card bore no signature, just one sentence: still breathing, still grateful. 1 year later, a shaky 47-second video film from the wedding went viral. It showed a bride dropping her bouquet, stepping off the aisle, and kneeling beside an old man in rags before walking him down the aisle herself. The caption read, "She canceled the ceremony to honor the man who once saved her life." In 24 hours, it had 7 million views. News outlets called, journalists reached out, influencers wrote think pieces, hashtags bloomed, but Maggie declined every interview. When asked why, she answered simply because it wasn't a performance. It was a memory kept, then returned. At the Promise Corner, things quietly grew, not in size but in depth. People came not just to eat, but to leave things behind: folded stories, photographs, hand-drawn, thank yous, childhood memories scrawled on napkins. Maggie placed them in a small glass display she called the thanks shelf. Pinned notes said things like, "You didn't ask why I needed help. You just gave it. That sandwich told me I was still worth waking up for. You saw me before I saw myself again." That winter, a parcel arrived. No name, no sender. Inside, a fire helmet with burn marks, a silver pendant, and a torn photo of a younger Thomas Reed carrying a girl through smoke, her arms around his neck. Taped to it was a note: "If anyone ever asks how I lasted 10 years longer than I should have, tell them about the girl with breakfast in her hands and fire in her eyes." Maggie framed everything, hung it above the register, just beside the bell that rang when someone walked in, just below a sign that read, "Please take what you need and leave what you've healed." Not every hero wants to be remembered. Not every wounded soul needs saving. Sometimes they just need to be seen. And sometimes the most sacred moment in a wedding isn't the kiss or the ring, but the second the world stopped to remember that every stranger carries a story we've yet to hear. Because real heroes don't always wear medals. Sometimes they simply walk beside you, quietly, until you notice.